They said I was losing my mind, but I wasn't losing anything. I was just tired of pretending their lies were my truth. My daughter Linda thought she could steal 40 years of my life savings and lock me away in a memory care unit like I was already gone. But she didn't count on one thing. I still had fight left in me. And when you corner a woman who built a business from nothing, raised 3 children alone, and survived 2 recessions, you better believe she's going to bite back. This is how I made my daughter realize that underestimating your mother is the most expensive mistake you'll ever make. I came to America with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. I was 22 years old, spoke broken English, and had $50 sewn into my coat lining. By the time Linda was born, I owned a small grocery store. By the time she graduated college, I owned 3. My husband left when the kids were young. Said he couldn't handle the pressure of my success. Said I made him feel small. So I made myself smaller for a while, until I realized that shrinking wouldn't bring him back and growing would feed my children. I worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. My hands cracked from the cold display cases, my back ached from lifting inventory, but every dollar I saved, every sacrifice I made was for them. For their education, for their future, for a security I never had. Linda was always the ambitious one. Straight A's. Full scholarship to business school. She came back with an MBA and big ideas about modernizing the stores. I was proud and foolish, because I signed papers without reading them, and gave her power of attorney for business decisions. I said she understood the modern market better than I did. I trusted her because she was my blood, my firstborn, the child I worked myself to the bone to educate. And that trust became the rope she used to hang me with. Started small at first. Bills that seemed higher than usual. Inventory that didn't match the receipts. Linda would wave her hand, dismiss my questions, tell me I was getting confused, mixing up the numbers. She'd pat my shoulder like I was a child who couldn't understand grown-up business. "Mama, you're 78, she'd say. "Let me handle the complicated stuff. You just focus on enjoying your retirement." Retirement? I never asked for retirement from stores I built with my bare hands. Watched grow from nothing to something. And suddenly I was supposed to step aside because I'd lived too many years to be trusted with my own life's work. The first real warning came when I tried to access the business accounts. The bank teller looked uncomfortable, said there had been some changes to the account permissions, that I'd need to speak with Linda about it. Account permissions. On my own money. Money I'd deposited every week for 30 years. But Linda wasn't answering her phone that day, or the next. When I finally reached her, she sounded annoyed, tired, like I was interrupting something important. "Mama, we talked about this," she said. "You signed the papers, remember? You wanted to simplify things." But I didn't remember signing any papers that would lock me out of my own accounts. I didn't remember agreeing to simplify anything except maybe my daughter's conscience. That's when I started paying attention, really paying attention, to the way Linda talked to me like I was already gone, the way she'd exchange glances with her husband David when they thought I wasn't looking, the way she'd answer questions I hadn't asked and ignore the ones I had. She was laying groundwork, building a narrative that I was slipping mentally, preparing everyone for what came next. What came next was a family meeting. Linda called it an intervention, called it an ambush. They gathered in my living room, Linda and David. My son Michael flew in from Seattle. My youngest daughter Sarah drove up from Portland. All of them sitting in a circle around my favorite chair like I was on trial for the crime of aging. Linda did most of the talking. Said they were concerned about me living alone. Said I'd been forgetting things, making mistakes with money, showing signs of confusion. Signs I'd never shown, symptoms I'd never had. But they had examples. Oh, they had examples. Times I'd supposedly repeated myself. Conversations I'd allegedly forgotten. Appointments I'd apparently missed. All of it fiction. All of it calculated to make me doubt my own mind. Michael looked uncomfortable. Sarah kept wiping her eyes. But neither of them contradicted Linda. Neither of them asked for proof. They just nodded along as she painted a picture of a woman who no longer existed. A confused, elderly mother who needed protection from herself. David had researched facilities, he said. Found a lovely place with excellent care, 24-hour supervision, activities designed for people with memory issues. I wasn't people with memory issues. I was Margaret Chen. I was their mother. I was the woman who sacrificed everything so they could sit in my living room and decide my fate like I wasn't even there. I tried to argue, tried to defend myself, but every word I spoke seemed to confirm their narrative. "See how agitated she gets when we try to help her," Linda said. "This is exactly what we're talking about. Agitation caused by confusion. They weren't helping me. They were erasing me and calling it love. They weren't protecting me. They were protecting themselves from the inconvenience of an aging mother who still had opinions, still had rights, still had fight left in her." The memory care facility was called Sunset Manor, ironic name for a place where they put people to wait for death. It had beige walls, artificial flowers, and that smell, that institutional smell of disinfectant and defeat. Linda had already toured it, already filled out paperwork, already paid the first month's fee. All I had to do was pack a bag and accept that this was my life now. Except I wasn't ready to accept anything. I'd spent 78 years making decisions for myself, and I wasn't about to stop because my daughter decided I was inconvenient. But they didn't give me a choice. The papers were already signed by Linda as my power of attorney. The room was already prepared. The staff was already expecting me. Michael and Sarah said they'd visit often, promised they'd make sure I was comfortable. But promises from people who just watched you get buried alive don't mean much. The first week was the hardest, not because of the facility itself, but because of the isolation. The way my phone calls went unanswered, the way my children had suddenly become too busy to visit, the way Linda had changed all the passwords to the business accounts and told the staff I shouldn't be bothered with financial matters because it caused me distress. Distress wasn't the word I'd have used. Rage was more accurate. Betrayal was more precise. But rage and betrayal don't fit neatly into medical charts, so they called it distress and medicated me for it. I pretended to take the pills, pretended to be calm, pretended to accept my new reality while I planned my escape. Because that's what it was. An escape from a prison my own daughter had built around me. I made friends with the night staff, learned their schedules, memorized their routines. I observed everything, documented everything, waited for my moment. Because even at 78, I knew that patience was still my greatest weapon. The moment came 3 weeks later during a shift change. I walked out the front door like I belonged there, like I was just going for a walk. No alarms, no chase, no dramatic exit. Just an old woman taking her dignity back one step at a time. I had memorized my lawyer's phone number. Harold Kim had handled my business legal work for 15 years, knew me before Linda decided I was incompetent, knew the real Margaret Chen, not the fictional version my daughter had created. Harold picked me up at a coffee shop 6 blocks from Sunset Manor. I was sitting there with a cup of tea and 30 years of fury waiting to be unleashed. When he saw me, his face went pale. "Mrs. Chen," he said, "Linda told us you were." "I'm exactly who I've always been," I interrupted. "And my daughter is about to learn that stealing from your mother is still stealing, even when you call it caregiving, even when you dress it up as love." We went straight to his office, where Harold pulled up my accounts, my business records, everything Linda had been hiding from me. The numbers were staggering. She'd transferred over $200,000 from the business accounts to her personal account, had taken out loans against the properties using forged signatures, had even started the process of selling the stores. She thought I'd never see the paperwork, thought I'd fade away quietly in that beige room while she liquidated my life's work. But Harold had copies of everything because he'd been suspicious too. Had noticed the sudden changes in my business practices, the way Linda had started making decisions without consulting me, the way she'd begun excluding me from meetings about my own company. He'd been building a case, waiting for me to contact him, waiting for me to fight back. And now I was ready to fight like my life depended on it. 'Cause it did. We filed emergency motions that afternoon. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, fraud, embezzlement, every legal term that fit what Linda had done to me. Harold also filed for an emergency guardianship hearing to reverse the power of attorney that had been signed under false pretenses, based on fabricated medical concerns. We had 3 weeks to gather evidence, 3 weeks to prove that I was exactly who I'd always been, a sharp businesswoman who'd been betrayed by the child she trusted most. The medical evaluation was the key. If I could prove mental competency, then everything Linda had done became criminal rather than protective. Harold arranged for an independent neurologist, Dr. Sarah Martinez, to evaluate me. The tests took 2 days: memory, cognitive function, reasoning ability, executive decision-making. I passed everything with scores that would make a 40-year-old proud. Dr. Martinez said there was absolutely no evidence of dementia or any cognitive decline that would warrant the legal actions taken against me. Meanwhile, Linda was panicking. She'd returned to Sunset Manor to find me gone, had called the police, reported me as a missing person with dementia. The facility was in crisis mode, thinking they'd lost a confused, elderly patient. But Harold had already contacted them, explained the situation, showed them the legal documents proving Linda's actions were fraudulent. The facility's director was horrified, said they'd been completely misled about my condition, said they'd never have accepted me if they'd known the truth. The court hearing was set for a Friday morning. Linda arrived with her own lawyer, looking confident, like she still believed her own lies, still thought she could convince a judge that her mother was incompetent while her mother sat across the courtroom with a stack of business records that proved otherwise. I wore my best suit, the navy blue one I'd bought for my first bank loan meeting 40 years ago. I wanted to look like what I was, a businesswoman who'd been robbed, not a confused old lady who needed protection. Linda's lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, said my walking away from the care facility proved I was confused, couldn't make rational decisions, was a danger to myself. But Dr. Martinez's evaluation spoke louder than their lies, and Harold had bank records, business correspondence, emails that showed Linda's systematic theft of my assets, her lies to medical professionals, her manipulation of legal documents to gain control of my life. The judge was a woman, maybe 50 years old, with steel in her eyes and no patience for elder abuse. She listened to both sides, reviewed the medical evidence, examined the financial records, and then she looked at Linda with the kind of disappointment that cuts deeper than anger. "Young woman," she said, "you have systematically defrauded your mother, manipulated medical professionals, and violated every legal and ethical boundary in pursuit of your mother's assets. This court finds no evidence of incompetency on the part of Margaret Chen and substantial evidence of financial exploitation on your part." The power of attorney was revoked immediately. All financial transfers were frozen pending investigation. Linda's access to my business accounts was terminated, and she was ordered to stay away from me pending criminal charges. The judge also ordered her to pay my legal fees and mandated that she undergo evaluation for financial crimes against the elderly. I watched my daughter's face crumble as the judge spoke, watched her realize that underestimating your mother's intelligence was about to cost her everything. But winning in court was just the beginning. I had my freedom back, my legal rights restored, my business accounts unfrozen. But I didn't have my family back, and I wasn't sure I wanted them back. The betrayal cut too deep, the violation of trust too severe. Michael and Sarah both called to apologize, said they'd been misled by Linda, said they never meant for things to go so far. But intentions don't undo actions. And sorry doesn't restore the nights I spent in that facility wondering if my own children thought I was better off dead. I threw myself back into the business with the energy of a woman who'd been given a second chance. My stores had suffered under Linda's mismanagement, but they weren't beyond saving. I hired new managers, people who understood that experience wasn't the same as incompetence, that age wasn't the same as inability. I worked 12-hour days again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because my business was proof that I was still here, still relevant, still sharp as the day I'd first turned the key in that original store. Linda tried to contact me several times, left voicemails full of tears and excuses. Said she'd been trying to protect me, said she'd gotten in over her head with her own finances and had borrowed against my accounts temporarily, said she'd been planning to pay everything back. But protection doesn't involve lies, temporarily doesn't last for months, and planning doesn't include selling your mother's life work while she's locked away in a memory care unit. The criminal case took 8 months. Linda pled guilty to elder financial abuse in exchange for a reduced sentence. She had to pay full restitution plus penalties and serve 18 months of probation with community service at a senior center. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter who'd claimed I was too confused to manage my own affairs now had to serve seniors as punishment for her crimes. The judge said she hoped Linda would learn something about the dignity and capability of older adults. I never saw her during those 18 months, never answered her calls, never responded to her letters. Because some betrayals are too deep for forgiveness, some wounds too wide for healing. She taught me that love without respect is just manipulation, that family loyalty is meaningless when it only flows one direction, that sometimes the people who claim to protect you are really just protecting themselves from the inconvenience of your existence. Michael and Sarah both tried to rebuild our relationship. Sarah moved back to Portland but visited monthly, brought her children who barely remembered their grandmother who disappeared into a care facility for reasons they couldn't understand. Michael called weekly. Awkward conversations where we both pretended the betrayal had been someone else's idea, someone else's choice. But trust, once broken, doesn't just glue back together. And I wasn't interested in pretending everything was fine when everything had changed. I sold 2 of the 3 stores, kept the original one. The one I'd built from nothing, the one that represented everything I'd overcome. I didn't need 3 stores anymore, didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I just needed to know that my life's work would continue, that the business I'd built with my own hands wouldn't die with me. I hired my store manager's daughter as a partner, someone young enough to carry the business forward, old enough to understand its history. With the money from the sales, I did something Linda never expected. I established a legal defense fund for elderly people facing financial abuse from their own families. I called it the Silver Shield Foundation, and I used my story as its founding principle. The woman they couldn't silence, helping other women and men who'd been silenced by children who thought love was spelled with $signs. I hired Harold as the foundation's legal counsel and Dr. Martinez as its medical advisor. The foundation has helped over 200 families in 5 years. 200 elderly people who were told they were confused when they were actually being robbed. 200 families where adult children thought they could rewrite their parents' lives for their own convenience. 200 stories of women and men who found their voices again, who reclaimed their dignity, who proved that age is not the same as incompetence, that experience is not the same as confusion. I'm 83 now, still sharp, still working, still fighting for people who've been written off by their own families. Linda has tried to contact me several times over the years. Birthday cards with no return address. Flowers delivered to the store with notes asking for forgiveness, for a chance to rebuild what we lost. But you can't rebuild what was never really there. You can't restore trust that was sold for money. You can't apologize your way back into a heart you broke for profit. I have a good life now, a full life, a purposeful life. I have my business, my foundation, my dignity intact. I have new family, chosen family, people who respect my mind as much as they love my heart. I have grandchildren who know their grandmother as a fighter, not a victim, who understand that age brings wisdom, not confusion, who see strength in my wrinkles and power in my gray hair. Sometimes people ask if I regret not forgiving Linda, if I miss having my daughter in my life. I tell them I miss the daughter I thought I had, the one who wouldn't have sold her mother's freedom for financial gain. But I don't miss the daughter I actually had, the one who looked at my 78 years and saw only inconvenience, saw only obstacles to her own comfort, saw only assets to be managed rather than a woman to be respected. They tried to silence me, thought that age had made me weak, thought that love had made me blind, thought that trust had made me stupid. But they were wrong about all of it. I wasn't weak, I was patient. I wasn't blind, I was watching. I wasn't stupid, I was strategic. And when they finally pushed me too far, I pushed back with 40 years of business experience, 30 years of legal knowledge, and a lifetime of knowing that the quietest woman in the room is often the most dangerous. I built an empire from nothing, survived betrayal by my own blood, and turned my pain into purpose. My story isn't about revenge. It's about resilience. It's about refusing to disappear just because someone else finds your existence inconvenient. It's about knowing that your worth isn't determined by your age. Your value isn't measured by your dependence. And your voice doesn't fade just because other people stop listening.
Margaret's story reminds us that our elders aren't burdens to be managed, they're treasures to be respected. Her Silver Shield Foundation continues to fight for elderly people facing financial abuse, proving that sometimes the most powerful voice in the room belongs to someone others tried to silence. If Margaret's story moved you, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because every day we share stories of ordinary people who did extraordinary things when life tried to break them. These aren't just stories, they're proof that resilience lives in all of us, waiting for the moment we decide we're worth fighting for. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you or someone you know faced similar challenges with family or aging? What would you have done in Margaret's situation? Your stories matter, and this community is here to listen and support each other. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that age is just a number, that experience is power, and that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Margaret proved that the most dangerous thing you can do is underestimate someone who's survived long enough to know exactly who they are. Like this video if you believe that dignity has no expiration date. And remember, we didn't survive this long by being weak. We survived by being strong. And we're not about to stop now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow with another story of someone who refused to let life write their ending for them.